We're going to go ahead and get started. All right. Well, we're glad you're all here. On behalf of Orrville Christian Church, welcome you here. So a couple housekeeping things first. If you have to use the restroom, out the door to your left. You'll see the signs down there for the restroom. My name is Adam Leimeister. I'm a member here at Orrville Christian Church. And it's my wife Charlene, who's running around giving things and taking them away. Over the past couple of years, we've been trying to work on some parenting ministry here. And so this is our latest event. And so, again, from Orrville Christian Church, welcome you here tonight. On your table, you're going to see these cards, the printed cards, okay, not the ones you filled out for these guys. Go ahead and fill these out, and Charlene's going to come around with a basket in a little bit. As soon as you fill those out and collect them, we have a couple door prizes, so later we'll pull something out of there for a door prize. You want to be part of that, so if you just put the information on there, we'd appreciate it. Do that, and put them all in one spot. She'll come around with a basket and get them. So tonight we've got three of Wayne County's finest here. We wanted to bring in some parenting experts tonight, but all the 28-year-olds with no kids were busy. So we got these guys instead. Remember how much you knew about parenting when you were 28 and didn't have kids? Yeah, I knew a lot back then too. So tonight, I'm going to introduce these guys. First guy on my right here is Mr. Dan Lutz. Dan's been an attorney for 31 years now. Started out in the Navy as an attorney. He's been a public defender. He's been a private attorney. And right now he's the Wayne County prosecutor. He's been doing that for the last 6 years. So Dan's seen it from all different sides. 7 years, sorry. 7 years. I didn't change it.
I know, I saw it.
7 years. Dan's married to Teresa. Teresa's with us tonight too. Together they have two sons, Ken, who's grown. He's 20 years old, lives down in Kentucky, and is married out of the house. So they successfully got one out. And then Reagan, who is 16 and still lives in their home. Next we have Tim VanSickle. Tim also is an attorney. He's been that way for 20 years now.
Been that way.
Never get enough.
You won't get over it, will you? Dan has become the Wayne County Municipal Judge. So if your kids get in trouble... Tim. Okay, I got him wrong. They'll see both these guys, okay, if they get in trouble. So you don't want your kids to go see them professionally. Tim is married to Natalie, and they have two boys also. They have Nathan, who's 15, and Andrew, who is 12. So he's making his son work tonight. Last we have Josh Hunt, down on the end. Josh has been in law enforcement since 1997. He served, started with the Wayne County Sheriff's Department, Orrville Police Department. For the last 5 years, he's worked for the Medway Drug Enforcement Agency as a technical surveillance agent, whatever that is.
It's fancy terms.
Yes.
He's watching you.
Josh is also married. He and his wife Rachel have 4 daughters. McKenna, who's 20, Chloe, 17, and they have twins, Reagan and Riley, who are 11. When we were talking earlier, he said he had 4 daughters. I didn't realize he had 4 daughters. And I told him we should take a minute and pray for him, and he said we should just take up an offering.
For the weddings.
Yes. And proms and all those sort of things.
Yes.
So we're going to turn these guys loose to do this thing that they do. They've done it. They've probably talked to some of your kids at schools. And so I'm going to let them handle it, but let me start with a word of prayer and then I'll turn it over to them. Father, we just thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. We thank you for this opportunity to learn about more about being parents and about what our kids are up against. And I thank you for these 3 gentlemen who have come tonight to share their expertise and share with us the things that they see every day. Father, I just pray that tonight will be enlightening for all who are here. And really, at the end of the night, I pray that you are glorified because we seek to be better parents, we seek to be better members of our community, and above all, seek to glorify you. Just be with us now, guide our conversation, and bless all that we do. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
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 All right, well, Adam asked, what's the plan, when we came in, and we said, we have no plan. So that's good, I think, and because we want this to be more of a conversation. When we go in, and all three of us go into the schools and talk to kids, that's kind of what we encourage. We want to go in there and not just lecture kids. We want to get them thinking and asking them questions and getting conversation going. So that's what we'd like to do here. So we're not going to go in any particular order. We're just going to kind of talk about what we've experienced in talking with the kids and in our professional lives, what we think's going on out there, what you should watch out for. And we want you guys to just feel free to, interrupt and ask questions if you have one. Otherwise, we'll be asking you the questions. Okay? Which we do that with the kids, and it works out really well.
So the exercise that I had all you guys do, write down, generally when I do my classes at either the middle schools or the high school, this is exactly how I start with the kids as well. And I ask them to tell me the top 3 things that are affecting them in school in a negative way. The interesting part is many of the answers are the same, from parents that you guys wrote down to what the kids are saying as well. It's also interesting to see the number of times things are repeated, and that everybody has that same idea, which is kind of interesting when you really think about it, especially when you think about we as a community are trying to make things better for our kids. Our kids are trying to make things better for their environment, and we all know what that negative problem may be, but we may not all be working towards fixing it. So I think it's interesting that everybody recognizes what the problem is. When we look across this page, a lot of what we see is the social media, the technology, and along with those social medias, we have a number of things on here, such as the bullying that goes with it, just the cell phones in general, TVs, all of those kinds of outside influences that seem to be affecting kids.
And what's interesting is when you look at everything that you folks submitted here as problems that you think your kids are facing, a lot of them you have control over as parents. So I guess I would say take heart that this is not a futile endeavor, that you have control over a lot of what the problem is. Now, some things are outside of your control. There's drugs on here, there's a lot of issues, but there's a lot of them on here that you can have a big impact and influence in your kids' lives. And, I'm a parent, and, there's days where you just feel like, I'm just going to let them do what they want to do. It's going to be easier. I give up. I raise the right flag. But you got to fight the good fight every single day, because the world is constantly bombarding our kids with the absolute opposite of what we want them to be and become. And if you let your guard slip for the smallest bit, that's where the world starts creeping in, and these type of issues become even more severe.
Yeah, yesterday morning I was speaking to 7th and 8th graders at Smithville during their breakaway program. They have that in the morning, and it's a religious studies thing that they're allowed to leave the school building, and they have a building that they can go into. And it's great when we get to talk to, like, at a Christian school or at breakaway, because we can then, just speak explicitly about truth, right? And yesterday it was Judge Mike Rickett and myself. He could only stay for one class. I stayed for both, but it's so freeing to just be able to talk about truth, to use scripture to talk to these kids' hearts. And one of the things I told them, I said, look, we're not going to, you guys have it worse than any other generation in the history of this country in terms of the world coming at you. I said, just because you have these things right here, no parent is going to be able to prevent, if their kids have these, no parent is going to prevent the world from coming at their kids. You can try putting apps on these things, your kids are going to figure out a way around them, okay? They're smarter than we are at that. So I tell them, we're not going to help you by imposing a whole bunch of external rules. We have to have rules, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's a free-for-all, but really we need to get to the heart of the children. We need to get to them internally so they can make the right choices. Right before I came over here, I was asking my 16-year-old son, so how do we protect you kids? I was just saying, what do you think? He goes, well, He goes, don't hide things from us. I go, well, what do you mean hide things from you? He goes, don't like pretend like the world's a real nice place and that, you know, tell us about the child predators out there. Tell us about this and that, and let us then be able to make the decision how to avoid those things. I think that's pretty good. We can't shelter our kids from what's out there because they're not sheltered. I mean, this stuff's gonna be coming at them whether we like it or not, whether it's through this or through their friends, through television, all these things that are listed on here. So we really gotta get to in my opinion, we gotta get to the hearts of our children so they make the right choices. Are they always gonna make the right choice? No. And that's okay. Because of the other mistake I think we make as parents is trying to protect them from ever making a mistake. Okay? And that's a big parental mistake by not allowing our kids to make mistakes. They have to learn sometimes the hard way. And my son even acknowledged that when I said, so are you saying like tell you about these things and then let you learn how to avoid them and sometimes learn the hard way? And he said, yeah.
And if I could expound a little bit on what he's saying about allowing them to make mistakes and understand that it's okay to make mistakes. One of the big things that our kids struggle with is learning that the mistake that they make doesn't have to be the life-ending mistake that so many of them see and so many of them think it is. You know, we're seeing that right now Northeast Ohio is, you know, one of the highest in teen suicides across the nation. You know, with what's going on in Perry High School and you know, the school district just to the east of us. The teen suicide, because kids don't understand that making the mistake is a normal thing, and that you can make a mistake and still overcome that, you know, and be able to learn from that, and trying to explain, you know, that you have to be able to understand that that mistake is what it is, and you can learn from it, or you can let it keep you, you know, you can let it keep you down. But I think we as parents also have to be able to let those things, you know, those things go as well, and use it as teaching points, you know, on the mistakes, instead of constantly, you know, pounding on the head for every, you know, every mistake that, you know, that we have.
I agree with that. I think we need to continually tell our kids that we're going to love them no matter what they do, right?
That's right.
They're going to be loved. It's not, you know, we don't want to give them the cold shoulder. We don't want to, you know, somehow send a message to them that if they mess up, right, if they mess up and make us look bad, that we don't love them anymore, or we're rejecting them.
Or that they can't come back from
it. They can't come back from it. And we got to, I try to tell my son that all the time. I said, look, I love you regardless of what you do. I may not be happy with things you do, and you may be disciplined for the things you do, but it doesn't mean I love you any less. And we got to keep continuing to convey that message to our kids.
And I think that's really big, especially with the social media stuff, and everybody, you know, everybody agrees. The large majority of these on here have social media on it as a negative impact on our kids. I think that with that goes the other thing that's written on here, and this is bullying probably multiple times, you know, across here. I think that all of us will agree that bullying has been around for generations and generations, and all of us will remember that, you know, there was at least one class or one person that you went to high school that was relentless on you, you know, coming through middle school and high school. There was always at least one person that you didn't want to deal with in school because you knew it was going to be a bad period or bad class or whatever it may be. But we also had the ability to, when that school day was over, you went home. And you didn't have to deal with that person again until maybe the next day, until that next period, or you could avoid them at lunch or whatever it may be. And our kids aren't able to avoid it. And that's because the social media that's you know, everything that is out there starts and it gets repeated and it goes viral, or even, you know, in this type of community, it doesn't have to go viral. You know, one or two people share it, and the next thing you know, you've got, you know, 200 people from town liking it, or, you know, commenting on it or whatever, and they see that repetitively. You know, every time they pull up their Facebook or pull up their Twitter or pull up Instagram, those negative comments are there, and they don't go away. So they don't get the break from the constant, you know, berating of, you know, of their peers at times. So you know, we have to be mindful of that, and we have to monitor what our kids are putting out there. You know, my daughter I get notifications every tweet my daughter sends. It texts my phone so that I know, hey, Chloe just tweeted something out. And I can't tell you how many times I'll read it, and I'm all about no drama. You're not putting something out there that's going to be drama, that's going to even give the appearance of drama, because there's just no sense in it. So I can't tell you how many times she'll put something out, and I'll send her a text. Hey, what's the tweet about? That's got to go. And it's, Dad, that's song lyrics.
That's drama.
Right. Yeah. But it's showing, number one, we're still paying attention to it, okay? And if it's something that I think is even remotely, then it's gone. You either delete it or you don't have Twitter, that kind of thing. But we have to stay up. Let me just ask real quick: how many of you have Facebook? Okay. How many of you have Instagram? How many of you have Snapchat? Okay. How many of you have
MySpace? Kick.
Kick.
That's been replaced now. They have a different one.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So how many of your kids have how many have Twitter? Okay. How many of your kids have those apps? No? Okay. Good.
Knowingly? He
Yeah.
doesn't, but he found a way to his friend's phone
Sure.
to create a
They'll always
Facebook
find a
page,
way.
Twitter page, Instagram
They
page.
find
Absolutely.
a way.
So that's how we kind of found out. I mean,
Yep.
because we didn't allow him to have that, but
Right.
lo and behold, here he is with his friend's phone.
Guys, listen, if your kids have access to a cell phone or a computer, they have knowledge of every one of these social media apps, okay? With that being said, you as parents need to be experts in each of these social media apps, okay? Because if you're not, you can't properly monitor what your kids are putting on there. And if you don't have it and don't know what it is, there's no way for you to know. And then there's no way for you to say, hey, look, that picture you put on there of, whatever, no, that's not good. You're putting too much information or whatever it may be, okay?
Maybe I'm a defeatist, but I think if they want to beat it, they're going to be one step ahead of you.
Oh, absolutely.
They always are. But,
Absolutely.
if you have a compliant
Dual
child
accounts.
who knows you're watching and they use that, and like your daughter.
They create dual accounts
Yeah. Right.
all the time.
And what I come back to is think about the example that you set for your children, because they're watching you very carefully, even though you don't think so. They're watching every little move you make. Mm-hmm. And when they see you spending an hour on Facebook, and then you turn around and tell them that Facebook is bad, there's a disconnect there. And your actions speak louder than what you're saying. So they think it's really not that bad if mom or dad are using it. And so, I'm just imagining if each one of these cards says something about pornography, yet your kids went home and watched you watching pornography, you would say, I think I know what the solution is here, right? Get rid of it. So think really long and hard about the example you set with social media on your own. Because we see a lot of cases at the court where the problem starts with social media. Mm. It is unbelievable. It's like a bunch of junior high kids some days. But real life adult problems start on social media, and people end up in jail because of it.
Mm-hmm. How many teachers are in here? Okay. How many parents do you have coming in taking your side instead of the side of their kids? I mean, I talked to teachers and they said it's horrendous how many times they come in defending their kids no matter what, attacking the teacher. The teacher's wrong. Back when I grew up, and I don't know, my teacher could break my arm and the teacher would still be right. Mm-hmm. It probably was. No, but so that's a big one that I talk to kids about. I talk to them about when they're disciplined. Do you enjoy being disciplined? I don't know. We hate it. Why do you think your parents discipline you? And most of them get it, and they say because they care about us and they love us. That's right. And God does the same thing with us, right? He doesn't let us go too far astray without bringing us back in line. And depending on how stubborn each one of us is, it's more painful for some than others. But I'm talking about myself. But one of the lessons I learned early on, after I got out of the Navy, I was a assistant public defender here in Wayne County, and we represented adults and juveniles. And I had one particular juvenile, and Tim will remember this because he helped me on a case later on, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But he, let's just call him Joe. Joe came into court. I forget what he was charged with, and he was facing delinquency charges in court. And his mom came in with him, and he has a single-parent home. I don't know where his dad was, but his mom came in with him, and she says to me, "I don't care what it takes, whatever you have to do, get him off." Okay? I knew right from that moment, even as young as I was then, and not even a parent, that this kid was doomed, and he was. His mom wanted him not to be held accountable, right? And briefly, I'll contrast that with another friend of mine, attorney in Worcester, Craig Reynolds, who, same thing happened. He got into juvenile court. His dad, Pete Reynolds, was an attorney, and Craig was going in all cocky, thinking, oh, my dad's an attorney, I'm going to get off. And his dad goes in and says, I don't care what it takes, whatever you can do to him, double it. Says that to the magistrate. So Craig never was back in court as a defendant. And that's because his dad was going to have him pay the consequences of his actions. Now, go back to Joe. Joe became an adult. He got convicted for crime after crime after crime. So ultimately, he got charged with vehicular homicide and hired me to defend him when I was in private practice now, okay? So he has to pay for my services now, right? Unlike a public defender he had to hire me and pay me. So his mother takes her life savings, I find out later, and cashes it out to pay my retainer. Now, Joe had to sign the retainer agreement, right? So we have a trial, and Joe, he ends up getting acquitted. And what does Joe, and I was able to refund several $1,000s of that retainer, but I had to refund it to Joe because Joe signed the contract with me. Do you think Joe gave that money back to his mother, her life savings? No. He took it, went to Canada, gambled it away, and not long after that was in prison in Indiana for doing something else. But that was just case after case, and his mother kept trying to bail him out, kept trying to get him out of trouble, and he never learned. So we have to let our kids be held accountable. We have to hold them accountable, and if they get in trouble at school, they have to be held. We have to allow the teachers to do their job and hold them accountable. But teachers are I feel sorry for teachers in this day and age because you hear so often that it's very rare that parents come in and believe the teacher and not take the side of the child. It's very rare.
And sometimes these folks aren't held accountable their entire life until they're standing in front of a judge. Mm-hmm. And then now it's my job to hold them accountable. And I've got some pretty poor tools because by the time it gets to me, it's not good. And so you can just see how they spent their whole life never being held accountable for the bad decisions. And then they're shocked. They are shocked when it's time to be held accountable as an adult.
Yeah, the court system are bad parents if you look at the recidivism rates. By the time it gets to us, it's not good. We're not very good at it.
And part of the,
we try.
Yeah, part of the issue about kids being able to make mistakes and learn from them and grow is when you're defined by your mistakes, your life is miserable. But we don't have to be defined by those mistakes. Our kids aren't defined by them if they have a higher purpose. And when we talk to the kids, a lot of times we'll ask them, who here believes that you have a purpose? And inevitably, in every class, one or two kids won't raise their hand. They are convinced that they have no purpose. Mm-hmm. And, sitting here in the church, I can tell you what your purpose is. All right? Your purpose is to honor and glorify God in all you do. And if you search to find your identity in anything other than Jesus Christ, you're gonna fail. All right? That's just the bottom line. Now, people don't like to hear that, and obviously I don't say that in court, but that would be in the newspaper, I'm sure. But the bottom line is, kids need to be able to make a mistake and know that that's not who they are, and hopefully we can get better at that. Yeah.
I have a question. This actually
Is he over 18?
No.
Okay, good.
He's 11.
Okay.
And it all started out with just a simple dinner. He just did not want to go ahead and go eat what I fixed, which was fine. He's a picky eater, I get it. But there's more to it. And my mom's been telling me for a couple of weeks now that something's wrong with him. He looks really depressed. He looks really sad. And I even asked him, came out flat all out and said, what's wrong with you? And he says, this is just the way I always look. I said, no, you don't. Usually you're happier. And it went to a complete blowout last night where he was just like, you never listen, you don't care, you don't, I have no rights. That's when it stopped. I was like, what do you mean you have no rights? And he's like, I'm a child. Nobody listens to children. Nobody wants to hear me. Nobody cares. And I was like, I care. I'm here. I'm listening. He's like, you don't get it. And I'm like, what don't I get? And he's like, he just went all out that nobody listens. No adult listens. Nobody cares. He has no rights as an 11-year-old child, and no adult will listen to him. And it's like my heart broke because I literally felt like my son couldn't trust in me to be able to come talk to me when all I've ever done to him is tell him, you can always come to me. You can always tell me anything. It doesn't matter what you've done. Like y'all said, I'm always here for you. I may not always like what you do, but I'm always here for you. You can tell me what's wrong. He clams up. He doesn't tell me anything because he literally feels like I'm not going to listen to him, like I'm not going to care enough to want to hear what the problem is. I have no idea if the problem is school, church, home. I know one of them is his brother, but I can't. He literally just wanted to knock him out last night, and I was like, hey, I can't let you do it. But one of these days,
One of these days I'm gonna let him.
You might be able to just whoop it out one day when both of you two are just angry at one another. I may just say, go in the backyard and beat each other to a pulp. Just go ahead, do it.
I wouldn't suggest it. I'm not an attorney, but I wouldn't suggest it. No, but you know, I'll say this. I think we are at a point, and I think everybody in this room will probably agree with me, and that is that I almost feel like kids nowadays feel like they have too many rights, and they have too many expectations of rights. And in fact, they believe that they have more rights than they actually are entitled to or have, or they should have. You know, and I think, you know, we see that based on, you look at the news and you follow the stories and you see, you know, all of these kids filing lawsuits against parents or, you know, whatever it may be, filing, you know, lawsuits against the teachers or walking out of schools and having, you know, no consequences for walking out of schools. You know, it's almost like we've given too many rights. And I'll tell you who's paying attention to this. And if you don't think that organizations are paying attention to the fact that our kids have more rights now and are able to do more things, think about last year. Think about 2 years ago. We sat through about 8 or 9 months worth of commercials on TV telling you to vote to legalize marijuana, right? We all sat through, if you have a TV, there was no way you didn't see commercials for 8 or 9 months telling you marijuana was going to stop seizures. It was going to stop, you know, glaucoma, and it was going to be great for cancer, and it was going to be all of these marvelous things that it was going to do, right? We sat for 9 months and listened to it. And all of that, they knew going into it that it was probably not something that they were going to get voted through. Okay, but their main goal was to reach who? Our kids, right? Because they know that if they influence our kids at an age that they're at in front of the TV, and they sit there and they watch that ad and they hear, hey, marijuana's okay, it's not a big deal. It stopped my baby from having seizures. I'm going to be able to move back to Ohio now and be around my family because I can give them, you know, cannabis, right? So their goal of those ads were not expecting to vote that actually through on the first try. Their goal was to influence our kids so that in the next couple of years, as they continue to press that and continue to press that, our kids are getting older and now they're a voting age, and now they're at the age that they feel like, hey, we can make a change in things, okay? Look at the school shootings. You know, we just had 17 kids killed in Parkland, Florida. And as a result, what happened? We had a 1 million kid march, 1 million people plus. We had kids out of school across the country organized by 17-year-olds, by 16-year-olds, okay? Think about it. That's crazy, you know, but these organizations pay attention to that kind of stuff. They see where the influence is coming from. They see the ability for kids to make a change and to put things out on social media, and it go crazy on social media, and these kids get behind it, and it grows legs, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's the same, that's what they were doing on the marijuana front. You know, so much so, they've passed legislation now to legalize marijuana in Ohio for medicinal uses. Starts in what, September, I believe it is. So, baby step, they got that in. And then it's going to continue to advance, okay? You know, and whatever your stance is on marijuana, I'll tell you just kind of a little bit of, you know, my thoughts on the marijuana thing. And, you know, people for years have said, well, who in here has heard marijuana is, it's safe, it's not harmful, it's a plant, right? It's all natural, right? It's not addictive, right? I mean, anybody heard these things? Okay. All right. So I'll tell you the top 3 things that people seek treatment for in the state of Ohio for addiction. All right. It's alcohol, it's opiates, and it's marijuana. Okay. So if marijuana is not addictive, why do people go into rehab and seek treatment for one of those substances? Okay. Number 1. Number 2, marijuana today is not marijuana that when we were kids. Okay. Especially you older kids in here. Exactly, right? Okay. You know, back in the 60s and 70s when marijuana was at its peak, it had a THC. THC is the common ingredient that gets you high in marijuana, okay? It had a THC value of somewhere between 3 and 6%, okay? The marijuana that we take off the streets now tests usually somewhere between 22 and 35% THC, okay? What that means is for every joint that our kids are sitting down and smoking, we would have had to sit down and smoke 10 at one time to get the same level of THC in it, okay? And on top of it, because we're so far advanced in the marijuana world now, we've now created what we call dab or wax, all right? Dab and wax is where they take butane, they strip THC off the marijuana, and they make a wax out of it, okay? This wax or dab, anybody heard the term dab? I'm not talking about that. Yeah, don't act like you guys didn't know what I was talking about. That has somewhere between 80 and 90% THC, okay? So you're talking, you know, the tip of the pen is about all you need to get high off of it, okay? So the marijuana that you see now is not the marijuana of old, okay? And in fact, we don't even know what the long-term effects are gonna be for this level of THC that our kids are, you know, are getting involved in. You know, so you have to keep that in mind. You know, when your kids have conversations about marijuana, okay? Because if they're not getting it from you, they're getting it from TV, they're getting it from their friends who are probably already using, they're getting it from the music that they're listening to on the radio, they're getting it from YouTube. You want to see some crazy videos, get on YouTube and just Google it. And there's video after video after video of people smoking large amounts of dab and falling off chairs, you know, from the amount of THC that they're consuming. So you need to have conversations with your kids about this stuff, because if they don't hear it from you, they're hearing it from somebody. And if they're not hearing from you that, hey, this is not something to mess around with, then the first time they're gonna hear about it is when a friend is saying, hey, it's just no big deal, it's just weed, you know. I'm sure you've all heard the term, you know, the argument that it's a plant, okay? And I'll give you that, it's a plant, right? Everybody agree with that? Okay. So what do you guys consider hard drugs?
Let me just add something.
Yeah.
I asked one of my juvenile prosecutors, I said, what are you seeing? Because this particular prosecutor deals with the abuse, dependency, and neglect cases, okay? So he's dealing with where kids are being taken from their parents and seeing what parents are doing and not doing. He said it comes down, he goes, after seeing all the stuff that he sees, he says it comes down to what they've been saying for hundreds of years, talk to your kids. And that's what you're saying, you talk to them. He said what he sees, one of the biggest problems is, I mentioned kind of the overprotective parent who defends the child at all costs, right? He sees the real issues with kids coming out on the other opposite extreme where parents just give up and become apathetic and complacent. They just are into their own stuff. They're on Facebook all the time, whatever. They're not, they just give up. They don't care. He mentioned a case where a father got a letter saying, hey, your kid hasn't been in school, and he didn't even realize that because he didn't even know where his kid was staying. He was staying at some friend's house. He had just given up. So apathy and complacency in parenting causes the same kind of damage that apathy and complacency causes in a marriage. If you just give up on your marriage and quit working on it, because marriage is hard work, if you quit working on it, it's going to go downhill. So will your children if you stop working on your kids. And we got to be careful about that. We can't go overboard, like the overprotective side. We can't exasperate our children, like we're told in Scripture that we should not do. So parenting isn't for wussies. I mean, hearing you talk about your son, I have 8 years between my two. I'm glad I have 8 years between my two boys because I can remember back, although sometimes I forget and think it was all rosy back then. But I can at least remember back, and my wife reminds me sometimes too, that hey, we went through this with Ken. Just hang on. It's a time of their life. This is what they do. They become sullen. They don't talk. They want to be by themselves. God has built in certain things into them to get them out of the nest, right? They want to become independent. And some of the stuff your son may be exhibiting there may be that, maybe just like, I don't know. But, there's a great parenting show on WCRF on the mornings on Saturday. It's Mark Greystone, Parenting Today's Teens. Listen to that on Saturday morning. It's just like a half hour. I forget what time. You can look it up on WCRF. But it's a good program to listen to because he interviews kids that they have down at his, it's like a home for kids that they bring for kids that are having real problems at home called Heartlight in Texas. And he interviews them and talks about them. Well, so what were your parents doing? Why were you doing what you were doing? And it gives you real insight into how kids think. And one of them is that my parents didn't listen to me. I felt like they could never listen to me. They wouldn't listen to me. And what we tend to do as parents, if we think something's going wrong with our kids, we kind of out of fear panic and want to lecture them and tell them, you can't do this, blah, blah, blah. Be careful with that. I think we need to pull back and just sit there and really listen and let them talk. And that's hard for me. I've had to learn the hard way to do that and just not say, well, I can fix that problem. It's kind of like the same way husbands have the problem they have with wives, right? Wife says a problem, they don't want a solution, they just want you to listen, right, hon? Anyway, so, a lot of guys aren't built that way, and that's tough. It's tough for dads, it's tough for husbands. They want to offer a solution, but sometimes you just got to sit there and listen, and they can say whatever, even if it's like out there. And you want to say, no, that's not, are you crazy? Don't say that. Let them say it. At least let them, I think just let them say it. And let them know that you're listening. So.
Absolutely. And with regard to the marijuana issue, we had 366 cases filed 2 years ago for driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs of abuse. Last year, it was almost 400. So it's going up at a relatively healthy rate. And I don't think it's because people are drinking more. I think it's because the drug use is so prevalent that we're getting so many more people who are driving under the influence of drugs. And so even if you don't have an issue with that, you're on the same roads. Your kids are on the same roads with those kids that are out driving under the influence of drugs. And it used to be very, very rare that we would get somebody who was popped for driving under the influence of drugs of abuse. Now it's very common. And it goes back to what Josh is saying, that culture of accepting marijuana. I mean, if they can redefine it as medicine, how can that be bad? Mm-hmm. That's exactly what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And You know,
What was that mascot's name? The bud, they were using like a college mascot that was a big bud of marijuana. Do you remember, guys? Remember that in the commercials? Crazy.
I mean, I'll just be blunt, no pun intended.
See what you did there.
Yeah. So, some of the dumbest people that I come in contact with are chronic marijuana users. It's just the way it is. Did
they start that way, or did they become that way?
Well,
Which came first?
they're not getting any. They're not getting any better. But you know, they can't keep a job because they can't pass a drug test. They know they're going to have to take a drug test. Their probation officer will tell them, next time you come in, you're taking a drug test, and they'll fail it. It's like, we're not making this rocket science for you. You still failed it.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's a big issue, and it affects you even if your own family's not involved with it.
Go ahead.
So I had my, oh yeah, there was their question.
Before you take a question,
Okay.
your mic for the live stream, who cannot hear the question, so if you could repeat the
Oh, okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I really identify with what you're saying about how kids now are like, it's becoming an issue where this becomes normalized to them through TV. I teach the 6th grade class, the drug awareness with what you guys do in the schools. And I teach 6th grade class, and I was amazed last year to find myself disputing marijuana with them because of the
Absolutely.
way that they, and what everything they heard was over TV.
Yeah.
From a friend.
So for our live stream audience, what she said was
We're right. What she said was we were right.
that we were right.
I'm just kidding.
That 6th graders in her class were saying marijuana is okay.
Go ahead.
I was at the Cleveland Zoo Monday with my granddaughter, and there was a table set up outside the Cleveland Zoo for people trying to legalize cannabis,
Yes.
marijuana.
Yes.
So this is, you know, and they were walking up to you. They weren't just sitting there, they were walking up to you, and all these kids are walking and stuff. Now, I know they know what cannabis is, but
Right.
at the Cleveland Zoo.
Yeah. You know, and it's huge. It really is something. You know, finding marijuana on people now, is like when I was younger, or in my early patrol days, was like somebody pulling a pack of cigarettes out of their pocket. Now it's like everybody we come in contact with has got nearly half the cars you stop. It seems like you stop and there's marijuana associated with the vehicle in some way, shape, or form. And let me just tell you, I'll just kind of break it down as far as this legalization goes, and I'll tell you part of what the problem is, because one of the things you're going to hear is, we're going to make all this money off of it. Okay, we're going to tax it. The state's going to make X number of dollars off of taxes, and it's complete bogus. Okay, because here's the problem with medical marijuana. I've been a cop for 20 years. All right, I've worked nothing but narcotics for the last almost 5 years, and you can lay a bag of medical grade marijuana over here, and a bag of marijuana that came from your local street dealer over here, and ask me to identify which one is the medical grade marijuana, and you're not going to be able to as a police officer. Okay, so what we've done is we've created an avenue for street level dealers to make more money. Okay, because what's going to happen is we're going to have a dispensary. Okay, right now, and keep this in mind, because there was an attempted legislation for Orrville City to deny or block a dispensary from being opened here locally in Orrville, and that measure was actually voted down temporarily to not block that, so to potentially allow a dispensary to come into the city limits of Orrville. Okay, now so you understand what a dispensary is. For medical marijuana, they're going to go to a doctor, they're going to get a prescription. They're going to take that prescription to a pharmacy or a dispensary. Inside of that dispensary is going to be about every type of marijuana, every flavor, every odor, all of that, every level of THC in that dispensary. Okay, and they will get their prescription filled in that dispensary. Okay, so the problem is, in that dispensary, my ounce of weed may be $420. We'll just use $420 just because it's. See what I did there? I did. So it may be $420. $120 of that may be tax. Okay, so that the government gets their cut of it, whether it's the state, whether it's the local, whether it's county, whatever it gets. Okay, and your people who are wanting to do the up and up thing and maybe have never lived in any type of underworld, never used marijuana before, are going to continue to pay that. Okay, for the average person who gets a medical marijuana card, just for instance, the state of Colorado, it's a 32-year-old white male. That's the average person who holds a medical marijuana card. Okay, think back to when you were 32, guys, and how much better shape you were in than what you are now, for most of us. So the problem is what we do now is the guy who's down the street and will sell it to you for $300. What are you going to pay? Are you going to pay $300? You're going to pay $420 for the same amount of weed that nobody can tell the difference on what it is, right? So you've now just increased his business because he can sell more and more people will do it because it's not a big deal. It's partially legalized. You know, what's the big deal? Okay. So keep it in mind. You know, if you know your local legislators, let them know. You know, look, this is not something we want here.
And let me back up though, just give a little history of how we passed medical marijuana in Ohio. It was conservative legislators who sponsored the bill to pass medical marijuana. And the goal was, as it was presented to my Prosecutors Association, was to head off the ballot initiative at the pass. So in other words, remember the recreational marijuana was a ballot initiative, right? And to try to prevent them from coming back around and trying again, or trying maybe next time with what we call medical marijuana, which for example, in a state like California, medical marijuana, it might as well be recreational marijuana. They're selling it on the beach as medical marijuana. Here's a card you can go get. So the goal was from the General Assembly in Ohio was to pass a medical marijuana bill where it could be as regulated as possible by the government. So to have the least harmful medical marijuana bill, so it wouldn't be like California, and it wouldn't be, and to head off another ballot initiative where they thought next time or the time after that it would pass, because they weren't going to give up. The organizations that want that marijuana to pass and legalize it weren't going to give up. So this may have worked. I think it probably just slowed it down for a while, because I think we'll probably see another ballot initiative to just make marijuana legal across the board.
Nathan, could you hit the slide of the penny?
The penny?
The penny.
Don't hit the wrong slide.
All right.
Nathan.
So,
Okay.
all right, what you see here is a penny, and you're all familiar with the size of a penny. You can see to the right, I apologize for the resolution, but you can see to the right there's some white powder. What that represents right there is a fatal dose of fentanyl. Now, fentanyl is many, many times more, 30 times more powerful than heroin? 50?
60.
60?
Up to 60, yeah.
It's a lot more powerful than heroin. And what we see is people putting a little bit of fentanyl with the marijuana. And I always ask these kids, well, they're 18 years old, but kids, I ask them, how much do you trust your drug dealer? Because they have every incentive to get you hooked on something that's going to turn you into a customer for life. And if they can sell a more potent product to you, they're going to do it because they want your business. And that harmless marijuana that you're buying, if it has any amount of that fentanyl in it, you are a goner. And that's all the more it takes to be fatal.
And even to go a step further, the carfentanil is even replacing the fentanyl, which is even stronger. To break it down to you, if you had a salt shaker and you dumped out 4 little grains of salt, that's enough to kill any one of us in the room. Just 4 grains, okay? And so what they're doing is they'll mix that with either fentanyl or they'll mix it with heroin and cut it. So yeah, we've seen marijuana as close as Cleveland that was allegedly laced with fentanyl.
Let me go over some numbers with you. I had my staff from 2017 go through what the cases were that kids were coming through juvenile court for, type of cases. This is where they get caught, all right? So this isn't necessarily indicative of what's all going on out there. But number 1 was runaways, okay? That was the biggest number of cases that came through juvenile court was kids that had run away. That's kind of dangerous in this day and age if you hear anything about human trafficking going on out there, right? That's a big concern. Ohio is one of the top states for human trafficking. I don't think Wayne County is one of the top counties, thank God, but we do have a human trafficking coalition. We're trying to educate the public to recognize the signs of human trafficking. We haven't had a lot of cases we've had to prosecute, not any that we've had to prosecute, thankfully, but that's a concern, right? Kids are running away, they get picked up by the wrong person, they're marketed, okay? Number 2 is disorderly conduct. That can encompass fighting, threatening type behavior, okay? 2 kids fighting, they're probably going to be delinquent by reason of disorderly conduct. Some of the threats that were made after the Parkland shooting, we just had a rash of threats in the schools about bombs and shootings and things like that. In some of those cases, it would be disorderly conduct. Number 3 was assaults, okay? So kids assaulting others, whether other kids or adults. 4, thefts. 5 was marijuana. And right behind it, about almost the same number, was drinking, underage drinking. So back in my day, you know, marijuana would have been way low, but underage drinking would have been high back in my high school days, right? Well, obviously marijuana, at least in 2017, surpassed underage drinking. Truancy was number 7. 8, sexting. This is scary. I hate to even say this because it kind of scared me when my juvenile prosecutor told me this, but he has a brother who's 7 years younger than him, and it's his conclusion that he thinks sexting now has become a normal form of courting in a dating relationship. So it's just normal for people thinking of getting together, hey, I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
Almost expected.
That's scary. So, you know, and with all these apps that we're talking about, you know, being so low on the list, that's not indicative of what's really happening out there. I think it's happening a lot. You know, with these apps where it disappears unless someone saves it on the other end, you know, we're not catching kids unless someone saved it on the other end or a parent somehow found it and saved it. So it's happening a lot more than number 8 on the list. The heavier drugs that we're just talking about, the opiates, we had no opiate cases for juveniles last year, which is great. We had cocaine, we had meth. In Wayne County, what we're seeing, and thankfully in one way, because the overdose deaths have declined in Wayne County from the opiates, right? The fentanyl, the carfentanil, the heroin, they've actually declined. That's not true what's happening across the state or the country, but they have declined in Wayne County, which is great. What has taken its place, not totally, we still have opiate cases. They're still, of course, happening, and overdose deaths are happening. But we have just methamphetamine like you wouldn't believe. And where that's coming from is, and Josh, I don't mean to rain on your parade, because Josh is the expert on this, but I'm seeing it from the prosecutor's standpoint. We have crystal methamphetamine that is just flooding the county from the cartels, right? Absolutely. I mean, and it's selling so cheap that no one needs to make their own meth anymore. I mean, a few years ago, all Josh and his buddies were doing at Medway was cleaning up meth labs because everybody was making their own meth. Well, now there's no reason to make your own meth because it's so cheap and you're getting better stuff, right? The crystal meth, which is a higher quality, more potent methamphetamine from outside the country, from Mexico, and wherever else. But methamphetamine is a real problem. And so, you know, when we go into the schools, they tell us, the experts tell us that you can't scare kids straight. It doesn't work. So we don't try to do that, except they said it might work if you can appeal to their vanity, right? So the only thing I do in terms of trying to scare them straight, and Nathan, if you want to hit that first slide, you guys may have seen these. These are the faces of meth. You know, Medway will sometimes have these at their booth at the fair. Before and after pictures of people who have been using meth. Now, what typically happens, someone gets arrested, they get arrested a little while later, and they admit to apparently using meth. Because on the left here, we have this guy who was arrested, and then 3 months later, he was arrested again and had been using meth during that 3-month time frame. And that's just 3 months. Anybody know why he has all those scabs on his face and everything? You even know what those are called? Huh? Meth.
By the way, every class gets that answer right.
Yeah. Meth bugs. They get the sensation, it's not reality, but they get the sensation that bugs are crawling under their skin. So they just pick at their face or their arms because it feels like there's bugs crawling under their skin. So, okay, that's 3 months. Nathan, let's go to the next one. Okay, this is a 1.5 years, this woman using meth. You can just see it, what it does to a person. See, we show these to the kids.
The average lifespan of a methamphetamine user is about 10 years.
Yeah, we'll get to that slide too, because that's in there. But, you know, you're showing these kids, and they're saying, you know, these middle school kids are going, ew, you know, because that's good. They don't want to look that way. You're appealing to their vanity, right? You're trying to scare them straight so they don't want to look like that. Okay, Nathan, next one. Okay, 2.5 years. That's my favorite. I mean, that one to me just looks like, man, she was made up for a Disney movie to be the witch or something on this.
Her face is like sliding off.
Yeah. So, 2.5 years. Okay, Nathan, next one. All right, this is what Josh was referring to. This is a progression of this woman. You know, your lifespan's a lot longer on meth than it is on opiates. You know, opiates will be maybe 5-10 minutes if you overdose. Meth, it'll take about 10 years, but look what it did to this woman. Look, I just sucked the life out of her. She died at age 37 there, or 38 it says. That's 37 on the last picture there. But look at how that just, what it does to someone. Okay, Nathan, next one. All right, now that's a picture of a woman who had a meth lab explosion. You know, for a while there, Wayne County Ohio was like one of the top states in the nation.
So Wayne County was number 2 in the state of Ohio for meth labs, and Ohio was number 3 in the nation.
Was that in 15?
Meth labs.
2015,
16, yep.
Yeah, 15 and 16. Like I said, we're not seeing meth labs. That's a good thing, I guess, with the availability of crystal meth. People aren't blowing themselves up, but that's what this woman did. She burned herself and had to go through hundreds of surgeries. And then I heard, I don't know if this is true, that this same woman went back to using meth after hundreds of surgeries to try to reconstruct her face because a meth lab blew up in her face. You know, we're talking meth lab, it's a 2-liter soda bottle. It's not like the laboratory, you know, that you may think of from Breaking Bad or something. It's not that. People put meth labs in their trunks. You found them in the back. They're making meth as they drive around. It's crazy. And it also, meth also affects dogs. How many dog lovers are in here? Huh? Very dangerous for dogs. So, with the kids, we all have to do that too. We have to add some humor into it, right? So,
It's funny.
but yeah, you know, that's the only place where we actually are trying to scare the kids straight is by appealing to their vanity. You don't want to look like this.
I think it's being real.
Right,
I mean, the difference is we're not just standing up there saying, "Hey, this is what this is what's going to happen to you," or "This will this will happen to you." We're showing them. You know, this is real life. You want to see it, plain as day.
Yeah.
Here's your picture. You know, do you want your profile picture to look like this on on Facebook or Twitter or whatever your choice is? That's is basically what that comes down to.
But what we really try to do then is then not talk about, we say, why do you think people are getting involved with the criminal justice system? They break the law. Yeah, why are they breaking the law? They're using drugs. Why are they using drugs? We try to dig down deeper with these kids and try to show, explain to them and get to the underlying reasons that people are doing these things. And Tim talked about one of those, that these people, a lot of the people we see come through the criminal justice system feel like they have no purpose. Their purpose is to serve themselves, and what a horrible life that is. So we ask the kids questions, and we say, what do you think? Why are they using drugs? And a big one that we try to draw out of them is that these people are in pain. They're in pain. They're self-medicating. And we try to tell them, if you ever had trauma, or if you know someone who's been traumatized, and we all have had trauma or will have trauma in our lives, deal with it. Meaning, go to see someone, see a professional, see a pastor, talk to someone who can help you talk through this. Don't stuff it. And I tell these kids, what happens when you stuff something? You just keep stuffing it down. Eventually, it's going to explode, and it's going to hurt you, or it's probably going to hurt others. You may find yourself in the criminal justice system.
So you guys have been talking about the drugs and stuff, and I think so often we have a picture of people who use drugs. We have this mental image of who that is, but who do you see?
Well, I'll tell you this.
I mean, what kind of feeling
This is the thing. Years ago when we went through the crack epidemic and that we had neighborhoods that we could go and we felt we could get a pretty good grasp on being able to contain and do those kinds of things. I'll tell you with the opiate side of things, it's completely opposite. The opiate side, what opiate addicts look like is everybody in this room. I can tell you that well, let's just take a show of hands. How many of you in here know of somebody who is either dealing with an opiate addiction, has lost somebody to an opiate addiction, or is just aware of somebody who, who uses? So if you look around and you think about who those people are, that's part of the reason that it was so difficult to actually go out and enforce, because it reached every demographic. It didn't matter how much money you made. It didn't matter what race you were. It didn't matter if you grew up in a two-parent home or a single-parent home. It didn't matter how much money you had. It didn't matter which neighborhood you lived in. It was reaching all of those. And so to try and enforce all of that area, it's very difficult to try and tackle it. We are seeing the decline here locally, but the crazy part is this: the people who were addicted to heroin, now mind you, heroin is a depressant, it brings you down, are the same people who are using methamphetamine, which is a stimulant, and it takes you, clear up here. And a lot of the people that we deal with will say, I use both, and it's not uncommon to catch a heroin user also in possession of methamphetamine. And when you talk to them, they say, well, the heroin takes me too low, the methamphetamine takes me, too high, so I use them both, okay? Well, to you or I, the normal person says, well, wait, if you didn't take the heroin and you didn't take the meth, you would be right where you're trying to be, right? But the problem is, once the addiction changes the chemical structure of your brain, you don't think properly. You or I, sitting out here, see on the news that you have 7 overdoses in 24 hours in the city of Worcester, and all of us are going, man, if I'm a heroin user, that would make me stop using heroin, right? Like I wouldn't be using heroin for the weekend because probably there's a bad batch of heroin. It's completely opposite for a heroin user. Instead, they go, I need to find the fire. I need to find who has it, and they seek out who has that. And the business actually increases for that person who has it, because they're looking for the best high that they can get, the strongest heroin that they can get. That's all they can think about, because it's a chemical change in the mind and in the brain for addiction. And it doesn't matter what that addiction is. They're simply looking for that same chemical release in the brain of the endorphins. So they go from alcohol, it may go from marijuana to alcohol to heroin to methamphetamine, back to cocaine to pornography to whatever it is, whatever that addiction cycle is all the same. It's the same chemical structure. Go ahead.
I don't know how much he was asking a question about what it looks like exactly. Would you agree that what it looks like for our kids in the schools would be often what's happening is them misusing prescription drugs wrong? That's one of the things that they might not be being, like, you think about drug pushers as someone maybe in Akron pushing a drug, or obviously it happens in Worcester as well in a lot of areas, but what's happening in our schools is where kids are being invited to use a prescription drug or an opioid from a kid at school. It's more common for them to use that rather than maybe using illegal drugs.
And for our live stream audience, the comment was, do we see with our younger kids them misusing or abusing prescription drugs, correct? Or maybe giving prescription drug to other kids. Even a lot of the adults that are now opiate addicts will say that it started with a prescription, maybe a valid prescription.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm just going to say it, I don't care for life. I think some of our doctors are the biggest pushers, drug pushers in this country. And you hear story after story where how they overprescribed the opiates.
We've prosecuted doctors. I mean, that is a fact.
Yeah. I mean, Tim even asked, he went to the dentist, and the dentist kept pushing him to take opiate, and he said, no, just take Tylenol. And it was, you almost felt like he was pressuring you to take like 100, not at a time, but to take a prescription. He wanted to kill him.
Maybe he didn't like you.
But yes, that a lot of people will attribute their opiate addiction, and probably that's more of a danger to our children, is the prescription drugs they're finding, because we're not seeing a lot of kids come through juvenile court from heroin or fentanyl or that stuff. And if they're using a prescription drug, they're probably not getting caught with it, right? And they're not overdosing
Right.
because it's regulated. Whereas when you're shooting yourself
Well,
up,
they still do. They
can.
still do, obviously.
Yeah, but not like when you're shooting something in your
Right.
vein that you don't know, is it straight heroin? Is it fentanyl? Does it have carfentanil in it? You know, those people are dropping like that.
I've yet to
So-
meet a heroin user or a heroin addict who tells me that the first time they used an opiate was heroin. So it's not like they're going to a party and the first time they decide to do something along those lines was to snort heroin, okay? Nearly every one of them will tell you that in some way, shape, or form they started with a pill, okay? Well, a prescription pill, whether it's Percocets, Vicodin, Oxycontin, whatever it is. Usually it's just like that. They're at a party, they get introduced by a boyfriend or a friend. They take it the first time, some alcohol. Okay, yeah, that was really good. The next time they're saying, hey, you should try and crush it. You get the better feeling, and then it just kind of spirals. Once the addiction takes place.
So I would just say be very careful if you're to the doctor or you take your kids to the doctor if they're athletes. Be very careful if the doctor wants to prescribe an opiate painkiller.
They're saying now that
Yeah.
people under the age of 27 should not even be prescribed
Right.
opiates because the brain is not completely developed to the point where it can help fight off the addiction cycle of it.
And if you have any old ones in your medicine cabinet, get rid of them.
Can I give a shameless plug on that?
Yes, that's
tomorrow is the Scarlet, Green, and Gray Day at Ohio ATI, and they are doing a prescription take back. We'll be out collecting prescriptions. So if you have old stuff in your medicine cabinet, that's where kids get it from. They get it from your house. They get it from their grandparents. They get it from friends who are getting it from medicine cabinets. If you have it, the best way to discard of it is not flush it down the toilet and all of that.
Don't do that.
Take it out to one of either the mailboxes at Orrville PD or Worcester PD or Dalton,
Not Worcester
wherever
PD.
you're from.
They don't have them.
I'm sorry, Wayne
Yeah,
County
the
Sheriff's
Justice
Office.
Center,
Excuse me,
yeah.
Justice Center.
Yeah.
Drop them off there. We'll take them back and dispose of them properly. So
We got so fed up with somebody struggling and doing everything they can to get clean for, say, 12 months and ending up with an injury in the ER and having a doctor start them back on that journey again. And these people would tell them, I have a problem with opiates. And the doctor would be like, yeah, whatever. Okay, you're going to need them. This is going to hurt or whatever. Okay? We had such a problem with that. Our probation officers started giving these people that are fighting for their life, started giving these people a paper that says, I am allergic to opiates. And before you prescribe them to me, I want you to explain to me why you feel the risks outweigh the benefits. Because that got the doctor's attention, because now they're thinking, uh-oh, I'm going to get sued if I give somebody medication they're allergic to. Because it is so frustrating when you see an addict who is literally fighting for their life and somebody sabotages it, and then they go back to it, and because they've been off of it for a little bit, their resistance is dropped, and they overdose immediately. A lot of these guys go down the day before they go into rehab because they want one more.
And Wayne County has joined what's called a multi-district lawsuit among a lot of other counties and cities against the opiate distributors and manufacturers because we believe there's evidence that they were knowingly doing this. So in other words, the DEA required distributors to flag when they saw an unusual number of orders for opiates, and those were ignored. Okay, they were supposed to be flagged and questioned. They weren't because they were making money. It's a huge federal case, and it's growing every day with the plaintiffs, the political divisions joining the lawsuit, and Wayne County has joined it because. If you ask me,
you can't deny it.
You can't deny it.
Go
It's
ahead.
clearly there.
I do think we've got about 12 minutes. Maybe we'll just kind of open it up to questions as best we can. Go ahead.
So I'm a mom of 3 under 4, and
Bless you.
I'm terrified now. Like I feel like I want to go and not let them out of the house ever, not give them a cell phone ever. So what would you say to young parents? I'm writing notes for my husband at home. He told me to take notes. What would you say? How do you balance protecting your kids in the world and
Right.
not being able to?
The question is, how do you protect your kids in the real world at a younger age, especially? I think I think the key to everything, I don't care if it's marriage or parenting or work, is communication. It's key in everything that we do. I think you have to communicate even at that young age. You have to be telling them, look, drugs are bad. You have to be telling them, look, you know, I've talked to my kids since they were in car seats. You know, they know. But it was because I had the exposure to it. A lot of people don't have any exposure to it. So I think the communication, having them not hear for the first time about marijuana or about drugs coming from somebody else, okay? The other thing is, we as parents, he said it earlier, you have to live by example. You know, if you're a parent drinking, you know, a 12-pack every night when you're coming home, and all of a sudden you want to know why my kid's, you know, taken to underage drinking at 14 and 15, sneaking out of the house and drinking, you got to look, you know, you got to look at that. You got to set that, you know, that example.
Yeah, the breakdown of the family is the biggest thing. Yep. So if you maintain a strong family, and it starts with the marriage, I mean, the enemy is going to attack your marriage first. Because if you have a strong marriage, you're going to have, normally, not always, I mean, it doesn't always work this way, but you have a really good chance that your kids are going to be okay if you have a strong marriage. I mean, so you want to make sure in your marriage you're working on issues if there are some. The last thing you want is parents working it against each other, or having kids being able to divide parents. Mm-hmm. You got to be consistent. You can't be undermining one another. You know, if you have a disagreement, don't do it in the presence of the kids, because that's just opens the door wide. So strengthen your marriage and love your kids, but your marriage has to come before loving the kids, and oftentimes we get that backwards. You know, you're to love your spouse first. You love God first, right? We get that wrong. You got to love God first. And show that through the way we live, love our spouse, and we love our kids in that order. You get that out of order. You know, you get out of that godly order, and things start screwing up. They do. You start having problems. So.
Yo, can I answer real quick?
Yep, sorry.
The last thing I want to say, just real quick, pray for your kids.
Oh, yeah.
Pray for them, and when you think you've done enough, pray some more. Okay, because we're all going to fail. God won't fail. Pray for your kids.
Pray with them.
Pray with them.
Yep.
Yes, pray over them. The second thing I'll say, pay close attention who they spend time with. Who's pouring into their life. Check out what they're into. Check out who their friends are. Check out their friends' parents. Hey, go to the Wayne County Municipal Court website. You can check their names. Okay?
That's huge. We didn't even mention that, but who they associate with.
Jim Tressel said it.
Know who they're
best,
associating with.
And that was, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. At one of the presentations I heard him, and he's dead on. You know?
Well, the Apostle Paul even said it in 1 Corinthians 15:33, which we share with the school kids. It says, "Do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals." Absolutely. I mean, it's truth. So know who your kids' friends are. That's a big one.
Go ahead, all the way in the back, shoes.
Yeah, you mentioned about these kids are really in pain, and I just wondered if you could list like the main pain that these kids are, you know, what's causing their biggest pain?
Sure.
Is it the bullying, or what is it?
I would absolutely say just the outside pressures of being a kid. I think nowadays, I think the pressures of living up to the social media, living up to everything you do, you know, being under a microscope, and the scrutiny of, you know, if I put this out, is somebody going to talk bad about me? That, you know, just that overall pressure of worrying constantly about what people are thinking, you know, about them, I think really comes into play.
And I think it goes back to their purpose. They're trying to live a life meeting these standards, and they're comparing themselves to celebrities. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to happen. Athletes, celebrities, whatever it is, get out of your head. It's not going to happen. You know, instead of looking at godly men and women to that's who I want to be like. You know, maybe they're not rich or famous, but their life is working out pretty decent. And so I guess I would just drive home that purpose. Like, you have a good purpose. You were created not by accident. You are God's creation, and, you know, by golly, you know, live like it, okay? You're not here by mistake.
Every class we talk to, we tell them that. We make sure. Yeah. Even the public schools. I mean, we tell them, you're here for a reason. You have a purpose in life. We talk about peer pressure is a big one. We talk about how there's negative peer pressure and positive peer pressure, that they're all leaders. They have influence on somebody, so they're a leader. and that they can be a leader for good and have positive peer pressure on their, whoever they associate with, their friends, their teachers, their siblings. We try to, give them that message all the time. And I think, I don't know how to answer that question, the pain, because there's probably a whole variety of reasons they're in pain. But a big one, I think, is that they feel, what's the point of life? Yeah. We have this suicide epidemic. They feel there's no point of life, and, the parents that are here, obviously, your kids are going to have a huge advantage because you're here. You care.
Involved.
I mean, if you see the stuff, this is horrible, but my juvenile prosecutor, who I hired 6 months ago, she was out of the workforce for 7 years, and she's a pastor's wife. And she came in, and 2 weeks after she came in, she wanted to quit because of what she was seeing. She couldn't handle what she was seeing, what the kids are going through and doing. I convinced her, don't give up so early. She lasted 6 months. She told me she's resigning yesterday. So, Beth, do you want the job? No. Okay. That's the last pastor's wife I hired. But anyway.
Go ahead. We got one more.
This kind of goes along with her question, but I'm curious, as parents, I have a daughter who's going into kindergarten. How do I protect that innocence of being so young, but not sheltering her from, how often, how early do I need to have those conversations about the outside things like drugs and stuff?
Don't ask me.
I think you do.
I tried telling my oldest son, this is a funny story. So I tried telling Ken when he probably, he's obviously too young. I said, he's going to hear this from somebody at school, so I'm going to tell him about the birds and the bees. And I started telling him, and he just covers his ears saying, I don't need to hear this right now. So
I've talked to my kids. Granted, my kids are, I feel bad for my kids at times. But here's the thing, we'll be places. And I recognize, people who are under the influence of things, and I'll point people out. Do you see this person over here? Do you see the head nod? Do you see that they can't, walk straight? Okay, that's what you look like. That's what your life is when when you're doing drugs. I've always talked to my kids, maybe too much. The odds are, I have 4 daughters. The odds of having a child who is going to deal with addiction with 4 kids is pretty high, that you have a child that you may have to deal with that. So I like my odds in explaining to them and being real, but obviously you don't want to overdo it. I share a personal experience in my daughter. I have a daughter with a severe peanut allergy, severe nut allergy, all the way around. And we found out when she was kindergarten age. With that being severe, you have to explain to them, listen, you can never eat anything that was made in a factory, anything, and stress to them. In doing so, we also created then an anxiety to where she won't eat places, okay? Because she lays in bed and says, I don't want to die, okay? So there is that fine line, of course, but trying to emphasize, hey, look, we're not, I'm not trying to scare you, but I want you to understand and be real. I think all of us out here will probably say that we had some kind of drug education when we were kids in schools, all right? We all had the commercials, this is your brain on drugs kind of stuff, right? Okay? Everybody remembers that. Our kids don't have it, okay? It was cut out of schools years ago. Orrville has just recently started getting it back, but they're not getting the drug education from anywhere else. So unless we're educating our kids, and until we reach a point where we decide, hey, you know what, from now on, we've got to get to this grade and teach every kid coming up through, we won't beat this issue, okay?
And I want to say something just to make sure I said it. You can do everything right as best you can and still have a kid that goes the wrong way. So
absolutely.
We can just do the best we can, and they're in God's hands. And I like what Tim said. I mean, we need to be praying continuously. If I get where I want to try fixing it, right? And God sometimes has to say, wait a minute, when are you ever going to depend on me? We don't want to just do anything, just pray. I mean, we have to both be active, but we also have to depend on God to work through us. So pray continuously that the Holy Spirit works through you to say the right things, to do the right things with your kids. God will honor that prayer, but still your kids may go their own way because they do have their own will. Jim McComas, a good friend of mine, pastor church up in Creston. His son Matthew died of an overdose. Great family, great family background, great upbringing, but he got addicted to opiates. He died.
Go ahead.
So.
I was just gonna say, we have 5 kids, ages 15 to 31, and we worked with youth for 30 years, and just our observations have been, one, parents need to be involved in their kids' lives. You need to know, like they said, who the friends are. It doesn't work just to drop. We've seen kids drop off at church and they're at every event, but the parents aren't involved, and almost across the board, those kids end up in trouble. And secondly, I would say, be aware of, if your kids have one of these, be aware of what's out there. Know what's on your kid's phone. Know what Kik is, know what Snapchat is, get in there, and it changes like every day. There's new apps every day.
As soon as you figure it out.
Yeah, as soon as, and know that they know every block. Do not think that your kid will not do this. We have 5 boys, 4 of them are grown. I'll tell you, every single one of them has dabbled in pornography. It's a boy thing. It's across the board. Don't stick your head in the sand and think that your kids will not do this stuff. So you need to be involved. Your kids have no right to, I mean, you can give them privacy, but when they have this at their hands,
Yeah, the Fourth Amendment.
you guys gotta know.
The Fourth Amendment does not apply in your home. Remember that. You don't need a search warrant to search your kid's room.
Until they're 18.
True.
Anybody else? I think we're down to the last. Oh, we're over by a minute. I apologize.
Are there any more cards? So Shirley, grab those. So
I also have to say something that, when going back to, I'm a mom with a young kid, like, my one side of the family, they have had an addiction issue, and it's a grandparent, so we've had, like, cut my daughter off from them.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's okay. Take your time.
But it's, I know it's the right thing.
Sure.
So I guess I ask you guys, how do you deal with it? It's that close of a family member.
Yeah. I guess I'm fortunate. I do have a cousin, who is an addict, but we're not super close. But I think the mistake that I see a lot of times, and I can't even say mistake because I can't judge people in what they're in, but when we talk with parents, and they're afraid to give the tough love, okay, and they're afraid to, maybe isolate their kid, when it comes to addiction, sometimes getting away from everybody else and everything else is the only way that works. And I mean, sometimes you have to take your kid, put them on a plane and move them to Florida to get them away from everybody that's here, just for that fresh start and because that's all that works. But the tough love thing, I think, is difficult, but you have to remember this, okay? Your number one goal is to raise that child up, okay? And to protect that child. And it doesn't matter if, that's your parent that's negatively influencing them, or it's their, brother, or, whatever it may be, the father for that. Your goal is to protect that child. And you have to do everything, within your means to do that. And if it means that you have to remove that person, I think sometimes we as Christians think that we have to be accepting and nice to everybody and willing to just let people walk on us at any point in time because that's the Christian way, turn the other cheek kind of thing, It's just not, that's not the case. If somebody's negatively impacting your walk and impacting your family, you don't have to accept that. It's okay to say, no, I'm not going to allow you to cause harm, to my kid. But I also say it's a talking point. She said, you want to talk about a talking point? You think your kids don't recognize that grandpa or whoever has the addiction? That's when you say, look, look at how bad this is affecting their life. Look at where their life is. Look at the mistakes that are going on. You need to keep that in mind, you know. So I think, as hard as that is, you know, you sometimes do have to just cut it off.
And your kids someday will be old enough to understand exactly what you did and why you did it, so don't ever second guess yourself for protecting them.
Yep.
And for everyone, never be afraid to reach out for help, professional help or whatever. There's nothing wrong with
Absolutely.
that. We are all going through it in this life. And I'm telling you what, if we start thinking we can get through it on our own, we're sorely mistaken. So, you know, get help when you need it, to talk to professionals who can give you professional advice.
Don't
Unlike
stuff
us yahoos.
So do you guys go to Orrville schools then? Are you coming into Orrville schools?
Yeah,
We've been there.
we go to,
What grade?
well, we prefer middle
middle
school
school.
because we think they're still receptive.
I do.
But we do go to high school too.
I do mostly high school classes.
Yeah.
Just seems to be my pattern. We usually do a 10th grade health class. I actually go to probably every school but Orrville currently, and but they do the same program, you know,
Yeah.
through Orrville, but it's just not one that I generally do.
If there's anybody here, you know, that old huddle program that they've been, man, the impact that's having, just meeting with a kid once a week on these kids that are at-risk kids. If you have any time where you can do that, sign up and do it.
And I think we should definitely point out too, the program that we're all involved with is through the Pregnancy Care Center out of Worcester. And that is what that's how we get into the schools. They have an active program that we have been chosen to participate in. And so your support for that program and that going into, you know, the schools is vital. So keep that in mind if you're looking for, you know, an organization to volunteer for, an organization to donate to. You know, they're constantly, you know, they put together some really good programs, and they are very, very good about making sure that we, you know, get the platform that we need to be able to, you know, talk to kids about, you know, staying clean. So keep that in mind.
We're part of Southeast Local, and in the high school they do random drug tests.
Yeah.
But it's just for
Only extracurricular, right?
It is only for the athletes. Why is that?
It's voluntary. That's why. So basically they can enforce it under voluntary conditions, and that is because it's not a right to participate in an extracurricular activity, okay? So if you want to participate, you have to agree to those terms.
So in other words, the drug testing is not voluntary, but them entering a voluntary program, they have to go through that.
Correct.
Yeah.
They have to agree to
That's a
consent to that.
condition, yeah.
But they still get tested.
All right, we're gonna wrap it. We could probably keep going on with questions for a long time, but we have to wrap this up. We have some door prizes to give away, so.
Somebody's gonna draw them again this week.
What if she draws her own name? Doesn't look like a fix.
We have Rhonda Troyer. And just come up, we've got 5. So come up and you get to choose first. Tiffany Amstutz.